is then 240. So what does this actually mean? All we are saying when we're rounding 243 to the nearest 10 is that on a number line we are saying that the number 243 is a lot closer to 240 than it is to 250. We are saying that we're not overly concerned with the 3. So if this is midway 245, what this is telling you is that 243, which would be probably around there, we are saying that 243 is much closer to 240 than it is to 250. That's why we round it down to 240. Now, to use the same example, if we were to take the same number, but now we're going to round it to the nearest 100, okay? Putting our number back in our place value chart, units, tens, and hundreds. Now what we want to do is decide whether my number is closer to 200 or to 300 on the number line, because now I'm rounding it to the nearest 100. So my hundreds column is here, so my critical digit is the one immediately to the right, which now is going to be the 4. So the 4 determines whether this gets rounded up to 300 or whether it gets rounded down and stays as 200. So 4 again will fall in this category of being 4 and below. So again my number gets rounded down, which means that instead of 243 it becomes 200, because now I'm rounding to the closest 100. And what this is saying is that this will be midway, so 250, and this is telling you that 243, which would be somewhere there, 243 is a lot closer to 200 than it is to 300. That's what rounding to the nearest 100 means. So you can see that a number will change in how you round it depending on where you're rounding it to, whether you're rounding it to the nearest 10 or to the nearest 100. Okay, so now we're going to move on to example number 2. So we've been given the number 6,789 and we want to round it to the nearest 100. So units, tens, hundreds, this is my hundreds column. Okay, that means I'm no longer going to have these 2 digits appearing in my number, they are going to get rounded. So now, how do I know whether to round this up or down? So I go to the critical digit. Critical digit is immediately to the right of the number that I want to round, and the critical digit is 8. So going back, we know that if a number is 5 or above, we round up. So that means that we're going to round up. So this will now become 8, because the critical digit is telling me to round this up. So it's going to become 8. this is telling you is that the number 6,789 is closer to 6,800 than it is to 6,700. Therefore, this is what we have rounded the number to. Okay. Example number 3. So we've got the number 3,156 and we want to round it to the nearest thousand. So let's find which digit is in my thousands column. So units, tens, hundreds, thousands. Okay, so my number will become either 3,000 or 4,000 because it's either going to get rounded up or down. How do I know if to round it up or down? I have to look at the number immediately to its right. The critical digit in this example is 1, and I have to now decide the 1 is going to tell me whether I'm going to round the 3 up or down. So, because 1 falls into this category of 4 and below, it's going to get rounded down. So, this will become 3,000. Okay, example number 4 wants us to round the number 98 to the nearest 10. So my tens column, so units, tens, so this is the digit. And to know whether it's going to get rounded up or down, I have to look at the critical digit, which is immediately to its right, and in this case that is the 8. So the 8 determines whether I go up or down. So going back to this, 8 falls in the category of 5 and above, so it's going to get rounded up. And so this is going to become 100. And example number 5, I've got the number 12,499 and I want to round it to the nearest thousand. So I'm going to identify my thousands column. So units, tens, hundreds, thousands. Okay. So to know if that will get rounded up or down, I look at the digit immediately to its right. That is my critical digit. And in this case, the critical digit is 4. So I know that any digit 4 or lower gets rounded down. So in this example, our number will get rounded down. And therefore this will become 12,000. If this critical digit, if it was, let's say, a 7, then the number would be rounded up, and then it would be So now I want to go through some examples with decimals. So here we have the number 4.76, and we are being asked to round it to one decimal place. So our strategy remains the same. Let's identify our decimal. There it is. So one decimal place is literally one spot straight after the decimal, which is your tenths column. So to know whether this gets rounded up or down, we look at the digit immediately to its right, and that is a 6. And we know that anything 5 or above gets rounded up. Therefore, this will become 4.8, because the 7 gets rounded up to an 8, and that is rounded to one decimal place. Okay, example 7, we have the number 9.13, and again it's going to get rounded to one decimal place. So, here's my decimal. This is one decimal place, tenths column. To know if to round it up or down, I look at the critical digit, which is immediately to its right. It is a 3. So, given it falls in this category of 4 and below, it is going to get rounded down. So this will become 9.1. Okay, and that is to one decimal place. Okay, example number 8. We have the number 5.44, and we want to round it to one decimal place. So again, I identify my decimal, which is here. So this is one decimal place. To know if to round it up or down, I look at the digit immediately to its right, which is the critical digit, which is a 4. 4 falls into this category of being rounded down. So my number now becomes 5.4. It stops there. Again, just to show by contrast that if this number was an 8, for example, then my answer would be different, because I would look at my critical digit, and given it's an 8, it would now get rounded up, which then means that this is going to become 5.5, because it would get rounded up. So that's the difference between rounding it up or down. Okay, example number 9. 2.85 rounded to one decimal place. So hopefully you're getting the hang of this now. There's my decimal. This is the one decimal place. So now I need to identify my critical digit immediately to the right, and it's a 5. 5 and above gets rounded up. So this will become 2.9. And example number 10. decimal. That is the digit that's been rounded up or down. So I look at the critical digit immediately to its right and I can see that it's a 5. 5 gets rounded up. Therefore, my answer will be 7 point. So this is going to get rounded up to 1. 7.1. Okay. Now I want to do a few examples with rounding. To 2 decimal places. So, number 11. We have the number 3.456. So I identify my decimal. Now I want to go to 2 decimal places, so that's 1, 2. So this is the digit that's going to get rounded up or down. It's in my hundredths column. And to know if it's going to get rounded up or down, I need to look at the critical digit, which again is going to be immediately to its right. And in this example it's a 6. So 6 falls into the category of rounded up. So now I know that this number will get rounded up. So my answer is 3.4. And now this has been rounded up to 6. And that is now rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay. Example number 12. 1.239. So there's my decimal. 1 decimal place, 2 decimal places. So this is the number that's going to get rounded up or down. Next step is to identify the critical digit immediately to its right, and we can see that it is a 9. 9 falls in the category of numbers that get rounded up. So this number is going to get rounded up. And so my answer is going to be 1.239. places. There's my decimal. That's one decimal place. That is my second decimal place. So to know whether this should be rounded up or down, I look at the digit immediately to its right, my critical digit, which in this example is 5. So 5 falls in the category of being rounded up. So to round this up, it will become a 10, which means that it's going to have to add 1 to this, which will make this a 10. So my hundredths and my tens will donate 1 to this, which means the whole thing will become just the number 10. So again, 9 gets rounded up to 10. So that becomes 0. And the 1 moves over to here. But then this becomes a 10. So 10, which then means the 1 gets moved over to here. Okay, so you've got 0, 0, and this is 9 plus 1 is 10. I know that these ones can be very difficult sometimes for students, either when they're rounding, or also if you're borrowing in a subtraction algorithm. When you've got zeros and nines, I know it can become quite confusing. So if you want me to do a video dedicated entirely to how to work with zeros and nines in examples like this, please let me know in the comments below, and I'm happy to do a half-an-hour video explaining those. But for now, we're going to move to the next example. In fact, it's the last example of doing 2 decimal places. So question number 15. We have the number 12.104, and we want to round it to 2 decimal places. So there's my decimal, so that's 1 decimal place and 2 decimal places. So this is the digit that's going to get rounded up or down. So to know which way it's going to go, I'm going to look at my critical digit immediately to its right. And in this example, my critical digit is 4, which falls in the category of being rounded down. So this number will become 12.1, and this is going to remain 0 because it's been rounded down, which then means your answer is simply 12.1. Okay, now we're going to move on to rounding numbers to 3 decimal places. So, question number 16. We have the number 4.9876, and we want to round it to 3 decimal places. So I find my decimal. several nines, and we are rounding to 3 decimal places. So there's my decimal, 1, 2, 3. So this is the digit that's going to get rounded up or down, and to know which way it's going to go, I look at my critical digit, which in this case is 9. So 9 means it's going to get rounded up. Now I'm just going to pull this whole thing down a bit. In fact, I might even spread it out just to make it easier. Okay. So 9 is going to get rounded. Sorry, this 9 is going to get rounded up. So if it gets rounded up, it's going to become 10. But I can only put one digit here, so I'm going to only keep my 0. And this one, I'm going to move to this column from my thousands to my hundreds column. So 1 plus 9 is 10. So that means that this one is also going to be a value of 10. So I can only keep the 0, and the 1 has to move here. So 1 plus 8 is 9, so that will become 9. And that will stay 7. Therefore, my answer is 7.900 or 7.9. Now, there is a difference between writing 7.900 versus 7.9, but we're not gonna get into that in the scope of this video. For this video, I really just want to talk about the rounding. Okay, so again, if you find these examples with 9s and 0s a bit difficult and you want me to make another video focusing on those, please just let me know in the comments and I'll happily do that. Okay, so our next example is 10.1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, we want to round it to 3 decimal places. So there's my decimal. 1, 2, 3. This is the digit that's going to get rounded up or down. And this is the critical digit that determines which way it's going to go. And because it's a 4, it's going to get rounded down. So that means that this is going to remain a 3, and my answer will be 10.123. Alright, very last example. Question number 20. We've got 5.5005, and we want to round to 3 decimal places. So there's my decimal. So 1, 2, 3. So my 0 is either